All right. Welcome everyone to today's edition of Flux Development Meeting, let's call it. Let me take a look at the agenda. Can someone volunteer to try and keep up with the notes, please? Is that a nod from you, Kingdon, or just a very subtle?
Yeah,
You're good? Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Okie dokie. Okay, so the first thing is on the list is the weekly check-in with me about image automation stuff. I have written a bunch of documentation for the new version of the image automation API. So just as a reminder, the idea is to have a V1 Alpha 2 that changes the shape of the image automation API to kind of make room for stuff we think we might want to add later. So things like having different sources and using namespaces to refer to things in different namespaces, stuff like that. Hey, Stefan. I'm just talking about the image automation stuff.
Hi, Michael.
Okay. So the PR, I think it's 139 in image automation controller repo. That PR introduces a new version and makes the controller and the tests and the documentation conform to the new version of that API. And I've also written a migration guide, so basically how to change your YAMLs. So ones that are Alpha 1, how to change them to V1 Alpha 2. And then ideally, when we go to V1 Beta 1, that will not need a migration guide because it'll just be a case of changing the version, API version. And that will be the kind of last time there'll be a breaking change, because after that, we follow the convention of doing automated conversions. So that is the update. It's ready to go. And I think it's even been reviewed. Stefan, you reviewed it, right? The PR with the V1 Alpha 2?
Yes, I think we should synchronize with image reflector controller. There it's simpler because it's just add the new version and wire it up in the controller so we can release them together. So
yeah, they're actually versioned. Oh, are they versioned differently? No, they're two different sets of objects in the same API version, aren't they? Just thinking about it. Yeah, okay, so it needs another version so that they all work together.
The challenge here is that the image automation controller uses the image reflector API image policy to detect all the policies that it has to apply. Yeah. Right now, it will only fetch the V1 Alpha 1, right? So it will stop working once people switch to image policy V1 Alpha 2, right? So first we need to bump image reflector API, release it. Then inside the image automation controller, we have to use V1 Alpha 2 inside the code. So they will work together. So we need to synchronize the two.
Yep. So it's not trying to, I imagine it is probably technically possible, but a giant faff and makes it more difficult for everyone to keep them at different versions. So yeah, that sounds sensible. Okay, cool. So that's kind of step one, isn't it? Just bump the version, API version of the reflector, and then we can release them at the same time, new minor version. Have you, in the past, removed the old version from the repo entirely? Yeah, okay.
Yes, because we made breaking changes, and if if you don't remove the version, then Kubernetes will try to upgrade automatically from one version to another. Then when you do kubectl get image automation, it will say, I cannot show you this resource because this field is not compatible or whatever. Right?
Okay, right. So the CRD has to have just the one version in it so that it, yeah, okay. And what do people do if they already have those V1 alpha ones? And if they apply the CRD, will that delete the things they've already got?
No, it will just set all these custom resources in a failed state.
Okay.
What's even worse is the fact that if they don't bump the version in their repo, at the next reconciliation, when customized controller will apply them, Kubernetes API will
stop
drop.
failing.
No, Kubernetes API will just drop all the fields that are not in there. So, for example, name and email, they will be removed altogether from etc.
Oh, right. Okay. So
that's the default behavior of Kubernetes 1, starting with 1.18. It drops everything that's not in the CRD spec. And is no longer there because we moved them under commit now.
Yeah. But it will probably fail in the dry run stage because it'll fail to validate, right? So kind of best case, it'll throw away all the data, and worst case, it'll fail, or actually the other way around, really. Best case, it'll fail to progress.
So it will fail only if we have a required field in V1 alpha 2, which is not in V1 alpha 1.
Yeah.
And I think that's our case because we have branch
source ref
is a requirement, right? So it will fail because hey, you cannot apply this image automation is not, it misses source ref.
Yep, cool. However, that's kind of working by coincidence, is it? And we can probably do better than that.
So once we get to V1 beta 1, when we decide to change stuff in V1 beta 2, we have to provide a conversion webhook. It's a thing that you can run it inside your controller. It listens on a different port and it registers as a webhook in Kubernetes API. So when Kubernetes API receives an object that's an older version, it will send that version to your webhook. The webhook can do the transformations, for example, moving the name and email from the top level to under Git commit, and send that forward to etcd. So you can code all these transformations by hand inside the controller.
Right, but we're not doing
have
webhooks for alpha versions, right? Just once we get to beta.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I have so far is bump the image reflector API version and release that, and then use it in the reflector and automation controllers. Remove, this is not necessarily in the exact right order, remove V1 alpha from repos and CRDs. When people upgrade to whatever new version, do they need to do anything? They'll need to do some sort of dance around changing their manifests, their YAMLs, right?
So they will do Flux Bootstrap or Flux install. That will deploy the new CRDs along with the controllers. From that moment on, the reconciliation will fail from Git due to, let's say, source ref required. Then they have to go into their Git repo, follow your guide on how to move to V1 alpha 2 for image update automation, and for the policy and image repository, they just have to bump the version number. They are fully compatible, so that's not a problem. But it requires this manual step where after the upgrade, you have to go into the repo and make your manifests match the server version.
Yeah, okay.
Do these conversion webhooks typically go back many versions, as far back as beta goes?
No.
Just to the previous version?
But, you know, in our case, the webhooks are just a temporary thing to allow people time to update their repos. Right? You shouldn't rely on the webhook and keep very old version in the repo and say, hey, I have a webhook that does the magic for me. That's not how GitOps is supposed to be. Like you should actually update your manifests.
Creative ways that this is going to go wrong in the future, but that was my,
a nice user experience would be if, let's say, the conversion happens in a Golang package that we use in the webhook, but we also use it in the CLI, and we offer some Flux convert file or upgrade file, and you point it to your file system. It will search all the YAMLs and do the transformation there, and then you commit the new versions to your repo.
I think Lucas and Dennis made a tool for doing that, a kind of standalone thing.
For cluster API, yeah.
Right. But I think it's generic. It might be specialized to cluster API, but most of it is generic enough to actually point at different versions of any API and have it convert.
Yeah, something like
that. Quite a nice thing to build in, potentially. Cool. All right. So I think that is enough to make a plan around the image automation, which is cool. So,
Michael, one note to add here. So the breaking changes are happening from Alpha 1 to Alpha 2, but when, let's say, we say, hey, Alpha 2 looks great, we are going to promote it to the beta version, then we'll not remove Alpha 2 from definitions. Because
sorry, say that last bit again, Stefan.
So when we move from Alpha 2 to Beta 1, if we don't change anything, if you don't break it again, then it's okay to leave both versions inside the custom resource definition. So Kubernetes does the conversion automatically and let people
and just promotes it effectively.
A month or two to upgrade their things in Git.
Yeah, cool, good point. I'll note that down. So if no breaking change between V1 alpha 1 and V1 alpha 2 and V1 beta 1. You can leave the depth and CID. Okay, cool. I will stick that in an issue just so we can keep track of it. Okay. Thanks for keeping up with that in the notes as well, Kingdom. Okay, so Daniel put a note here. I will just read it out. Alison has helped a lot with the current website project, and it'd be good to have her have access to the website repo. She is also helping with setting up a YouTube channel for us right now. She brings a lot of experience in terms of contrib X from the Kubernetes world as well. I feel it would be good to formally recognize this and have her be able to get access to the things she needs. So the idea, I think the moot is to add Alison, that's Alison that's here right now, to as a maintainer of the website and the community repo under Flux CD. So now me talking rather than me just reading out what Daniel wrote. So technically that is up to the website and community maintainers. However, of course, everyone can have a say, because in this community, it's all very consensus based. So I'll quickly go first. I think that sounds like a good idea. Alison certainly has made a lot of great contributions, and it'll be good to kind of bring her perspective to the maintainers team for those things. That's my thinking. Anyone else want to speak up? I'll mute myself for a bit.
I'm checking now to see who are the maintainers for community.
I think it's Scott and myself.
Daniel, you're here.
Yeah,
You just arrived in the last few seconds.
Yes, I just snuck in.
What did you?
Sorry,
what did you think of my impression of you?
I miss. Yes, no, well done.
I didn't totally nail the accent, but I had to go.
Next time.
So what procedure should we follow if no one is against? And I'm guessing no one is against it. Should Alison open up a request on both?
Yep, and get the current maintainers to. I mean, ultimately, that's it, to put it on record. That's what should happen.
Okay, so let's ask Alison to do that. And if anyone has any last thoughts, the pull request is the last resort for you to voice any concern.
I was just like, one thing I was going to add is like, is there a Flux maintainers mailing list that maybe we should put this out for a lazy consensus on? Maybe
Yes, there is one.
Yeah.
Yep, Daniel, do you want to do that? I think if you just wrote more or less what you wrote in the notes.
Sure. Do we
Flux
put
contrib,
everyone?
I think, or maintainers, Flux, one of those, whichever one it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I propose for Alison to open the two pull requests and then in the email link to those and ask people to comment there. If they have.
Perfect.
Super.
So we can move. Past this
So whenever we add somebody to a maintainers file, we update the mailing list as well.
Yeah, I think it's could be okay to announce it.
Sure, works for me.
We usually talk here about it, then in a pull request, but yeah, if we want to, there is so less traffic on the mailing list. I don't think it's people will think about it as spam. So
No, it's very much on topic.
More a courtesy, if anything, really. But
Super.
okay, that sounds good. Let's have a look. Is there anything else in? Kingdom, I'm guessing this is you, the GitHub Actions JSON tutorial. Do you want to have a talk about that?
I'm pretty sure it's content complete at this point. It has all of the examples and all of the content that I wanted to show. It should be good for people who are not familiar with JSONet. I was not familiar with JSONet when I started writing this at all, so I tried to bring people along as I built up my understanding. I think it turned out pretty good. So now what it really needs is, for me at least, and hopefully others as well, to go through the examples and see if there's anything missing or if there's anything that's difficult to follow. But I've done at least 5 read-throughs in the last day or two to look for simple text errors or bad grammatical flow. So that should be pretty minimal. If you see anything, please let me know. And hopefully maybe early next week we can merge this.
Cool. I have assigned myself so that it is on my radar notionally, and I would encourage anyone else that feels like they want to go through it, in practice, to do the same. I challenge all other contributors to do the same or better.
So I did read the whole thing. I haven't noticed any complications, so I could actually understand it even if I'm not a JSONnet user. I never used it, But I can clearly understand what's going on. What I didn't do is I didn't actually try out all the examples and make sure that there is no typo in a YAML somewhere or in JSONnet. And but overall, I really like it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
The other thing is that, and if you've looked a couple days ago, it's better in this regard now. There are more references. I moved all the references to the bottom of the Markdown file, so the Markdown is easier to read if you're trying to read the Markdown.
Yeah, I give it a read yesterday, so I think
Okay.
all that.
So you got most of that then. And yeah, thank you.
I'm going to try and do a stretch goal of trying to adapt it to use JK instead of JSON.
Cool.
Just to see if it, because I think one of the aims is to make it something you can adapt, right? It's to, yeah, cool. All right. We'll
week,
see how well I go.
I can move really quickly, then next week we'll have a Jenkins version to review.
Amazing. Cool. All right. Is there anything more to say on that, Kingdom?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, let's go back to the agenda. Actually, I should check whether there were action items from last week. There was one about opening a plan for V1 Alpha 2, which we've talked through, so that'll get done. Okay, is there any other business, anything people want to bring up spontaneously?
I want to announce what we shipped in the latest Flux release. So we did 2 patch releases yesterday, and one of the patch releases comes with open API schemas for all the Flux custom resources. So what we did was on every release, we pull all the Flux CRDs, we extract the open API schema in a JSON format, and then we publish those as a tar under the GitHub, in the GitHub release page for each release. Then you can use these schemas to validate your Git repositories, to do static validation of your Git repository, and not only with kubevol, for example. And you don't have to skip the Flux custom resources anymore. You can tell kubevol, hey, here are the Flux schema validation. And for example, you could catch early on typos in a hair release, or I don't know, fields that are not with the right type, and everything else for Flux as you do with Kubernetes deployments and so on. And I've updated the example. Here is the link. So in our Flux 2 customization Helm example, we show people how they can run the static analysis locally and also in CI before changes are merged in the main branch and are reconciled then on the clusters by Flux. And I've updated the validation script yesterday and to download the schemas from our release and use them in the validation side. So you can see here kubevol -- strict, additional schema locations, Flux CRD schemas. And with that, you can validate everything. It was a feature requested months and months ago. I didn't have time to look into it, but now it's done. So
it's really cool. JK can validate just given the stuff directly. It's really easy to do. And kubevol is really useful as well. I think it runs a few extra checks as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
kubevol. Schemas are good.
Yeah, kubevol has a repo with all the Kubernetes schemas from all the Kubernetes versions and so on.
Have they updated that? Because the one it was using only goes up to about 1.17 or something. But there's,
yes,
I know this because
updated.
JK sucks down all those and builds them into the image. Yeah. But
Well,
we found a new
must be
one.
huge. The image must be huge then.
That one is, yes. But I wrote a blog post about how, no, I'm writing a blog post about how it does. It uses lots of symlinks because almost nothing ever changes between versions. So you can.
Yeah, but
reduce
when
it
it
quite a
changes,
lot.
it really matters, right?
When it changes, it's thousands of files. Yeah. Totally. Cool. Is there other stuff in the new releases, Stefan?
We fixed some bugs around the new Bootstrap. We had a problem on Windows operating system. We fixed that around paths. Yeah, we ended up using Windows path in the cluster because but we fixed that, and we've introduced a different behavior for Bootstrap when we first released it, where let's say, so previously if a repository didn't exist and you run Bootstrap, it creates the repository for you with all the settings that you have prescribed to Flux. For example, is that repository public or private? Do you want, which teams should be added to the repo, and so on. And the previous Bootstrap will only do this kind of change of the repo only if the repo wasn't there. Now, the new Bootstrap uses a reconcile function from the GoGit providers. And what that means is if you run Bootstrap for an existing repository, which let's say is public, and you run Bootstrap, Bootstrap will make it private if you don't say private false. Right. So it changes an existing repository settings, and this can be a problem if you have like a public repo with many stars, contributors, and so on, and you run Bootstrap against it. It will make it private if you are not aware of that behavior. So what he did yesterday, he added a flag, and you have to opt in into this behavior. You have to say reconcile true, and only then all the settings that you give to Bootstrap will be applied to existing repositories. That's what we did. And yeah, we are sorry for those that ended up with private repos due to this change. We fixed it in 2 days after we released it.
Cool. Okay. I'll just give people a bit of time to think of anything they want to talk about, but if not, I think that might be the end of the meeting. Oh, okay, cool. Thanks very much, everyone. This was, which one's Wednesday, Daniel? Is it the EU one or the US?
This is the early one.
This is the early one, right? Okay, yes. So next week will be the slightly later one on a Thursday. Cool, and I'm hoping we can get Jordan to show us the latest of the web UI, but no promises.
Yay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thanks everyone.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.